Java development is back.
Yeah, I do not think Java aged well with a lot of the code.
One thing that we've historically disagreed strongly is the Java programming language. Deem says, Java is the best starting point for object-oriented programming. It's my first love, which I never forget.
That's the problem, really.
I think people got overexcited with object-oriented programming, and this goes way back to probably before you were born. The Gang of Four book, Design Patterns, it had 4 authors.
And trash.
Everyone just refers to it as the Gang of Four book. It went through all these object-oriented design patterns. Proxies and constructors and inheritance and, data objects. And it gave every pattern in programming a name. And then they wrote what was good about it and when you should use it and when it was bad and you shouldn't use it. And the book by itself is actually wonderful. But somehow people took this book and decided their code should be nothing but design patterns. So everything in Java suddenly became proxy factories. It's a factory that makes proxies for making proxies that make factories. And they just went bonkers. And they use these patterns everywhere in their code and made a point of naming everything with the name of the pattern they were using. Even though, I feel like the book clearly stated on every page reasons to not use this in your code. On every pattern, they said what was wrong with the pattern, right? I mean, everything has pros and cons, but people just went nuts. And they went so nuts that they poisoned newcomers' opinions of Java.
Yeah.
Right?
Java was, I think, maybe because of where it was being used, popular with enterprises. It was the test bed for that style of programming.
So they just launched Java 25, which, to be honest, I had tuned out enough that I thought Java 9 was the current version. But apparently the new version is 25. And I don't know if they switched to a yearly version or if I just missed 17 releases. Both are possible.
I don't know if it's like the Python thing where, I'm not involved enough in the Java community to say this is like a 2-3 thing where nobody's going to use anything past 8. Maybe they won't. I don't know.
But your list of complaint, the two of us just before we went live, were looking at the release notes.
And it's a completely different language. 25 is completely different.
And all the things he hated about Java were just fixed in this release.
Yeah, it actually looks like a really nice language. I'd be happy to use it. I don't know anything about
On the other hand, it's a brand new language,
yeah.
Right? What's your favorite programming language?
I could not pick a favorite one. There's too many.
When we hired you, you could. You were Mr. C++.
C++.
But now you have a few more years of work experience with it.
No, C++ made a lot of weird decisions it never recovered from. And they're obsessed with adding these bizarre features to the language that nobody asked for because it's the only thing they can agree on. They're so trivial. Like stood byte. Why do we need car and uint and stood byte? Who cares? It's completely meaningless. There's serious problems with the language that they're just ignoring and will never fix. It missed its mark. It's gone. I'm not interested. It rule by committee. Nobody can agree on anything. It's just move on.
The problem is this is basically the speech I gave my coworkers in 1994. In 1994, I was like, this thing has gone wrong. There's no recovery. It's time to replace C++.
The alternative was not Java, though. That's where you're wrong.
And I thought the alternative was Java, and I was wrong.
Yeah. I think that the world is trending in the right direction. I would say if I had to be, I could not pick a favorite language, but if I had to have 3, Rust, Python, and Bash, whatever. It's important for a lot of things. There are things you can do in 10 lines of Bash that would take 500 lines.
One line of code in Perl.
But you can actually read it.
So Perl changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a couple of years making a living just doing Perl, and it got so bad, right? It's a weird language in that, you can do things in one line of Perl that is 20 lines in any other language. But when you come back 1 week later, even though you did it and it's only been a week, it's just this cryptic string of symbols of $ signs and underbars and @ signs. And you can't tell what it is. I actually had a company, and I implemented a policy of if a bug is found in a Perl function,
right,
you must rewrite the Perl function. There's no attempting to fix bugs in functions because it was so impossible to understand the code. We had functions, they said what they did, and if that's not what they did, you had to write a different function that did what it actually said it did, and you couldn't reuse the code.
Yeah.
Because it's that bad.
Or write once language.
Yeah, I used to love Java. I mean, giving us a garbage collector, taking away the ability to have all those pointer errors.
Yeah.
There was a famous study at the time. You could take people with 3 years experience writing C++, give them, 2 days to learn Java, and then they would be coding Java twice as fast with half as many bugs. And it was totally real. Now, the code ran at 1/5 speed. And used 20 times as much memory, but depending on what you were doing, maybe who cares, right?
Yeah, I mean, the times that you need to have as much control over memory as most languages without a garbage collector is rare, but it comes up. And there are still tricks you can do in garbage collected languages to avoid allocations, statically sized buffers, for example.
Yeah.
And, like arena memory and stuff like that.
It came out that real-time Java at one point. I assume you don't remember this because you were probably 2. But what it was... basically, you allocated all of your objects, and then you said, now I'm real time, and there was no more, you could not create any more objects. And at that point, they were actually able to guarantee stuff about how fast Java would go and stuff. There'd be no weird pauses or whatever, because you were never making or destroying objects. The garbage collector had nothing to do.
And garbage collectors have become pretty good.
Yeah. There's been a lot of improvement.
Yeah. I mean, there's great work that people do in JavaScript all the time. And, the JDK hosts lots of languages, and they're not slow.
Right. So Java, just to explain this, right, you write the code in the Java language, a .java file, and you compile it down to like a .class file, which is this binary machine language for this virtual machine that doesn't really exist. And so when you port Java to a new operating system, you implement the Java virtual machine, which takes the virtual machine code and turns it into real code to run on that computer. So other people now have come along and written other languages like Kotlin, where it's a totally different programming language, but you compile it down to a .class file and it'll run in the JVM, and it's fine.
Yeah,
right?
And at first glance, you might say, well, a VM is never going to be as fast as compiled code, but it's not quite that clear. I mean, if you're running on a VM, you can do tricks like just-in-time compilation and optimize parts of the program for the particular requirements of like what it's doing at the time. Whereas compiling everything ahead of time, you can only make good guesses about what this code is supposed to be doing,
Right. So if you have a loop that does something until something happens, your compiler looking at the source code doesn't really have any way to know, is this probably going to happen one time or like 100 times before it happens or 1 billion times? So it's just going to make a guess. So it's like, I'll assume it's going to happen about 100 times.
Yeah.
Because that's what loops usually do. But with the Java virtual machine, when it's been running for a while, it could see every time you do this loop, it's 1,000 times, and then you hit it. It can optimize the code for that.
Yeah. Probably the language that exploits that the most is Ruby. They, from time to time, claim that they're faster than C. It's bogus, obviously, but they can still make that claim, whatever. But
Java startup time is awful. I assume they've done work to improve it, but I assume it's still awful. I mean, I'm a few years behind here, right? Because when it starts, it has to start this JVM, that has to load your file, that has to, start turning your virtual code into real code, where a C program, you run it, and it runs the first line of your code, and there's nothing in the middle, right? Where, with the Java, there's all this stuff, so starting the program takes a long time. But if you have a program that's going to run for 24 hours or 168 hours or 24/7, who cares how long it takes to start up, right?
Yeah.
As it runs longer and longer. So, it's give and take. But I was really surprised how much Java seems to be back. A lot of stuff from Rust and stuff, even weird little things that if you just want to write a little Java program. One of the things they added is you can just make a file and put in some Java code that'll run.
Oh, and finally!
And you don't have to do the imports and define a package and define a class and then define a method inside the class that returns void and then write your code, which
was ridiculous.
To be honest, but all the IDEs, you could just sort of say new command line program and it would give you a text file with that stuff written in, and you could just start writing your code inside the third brace. So it doesn't feel that big, but the fact that they're finally dealing with, these are sort of things that people have been complaining about in Java 1, they just got fixed. So it looks like somebody is hustling, right? Somebody is back to working on this.
Is Excel yes, Excel is a programming language. It's a Turing complete programming language. You can do real work in Excel.
So is making an Excel sheet programming?
I think so, yeah.
I think that if your Excel spreadsheet has both an if and a VLOOKUP, then you have passed into the point where you are doing software development.
Yeah, I think
If you're just typing numbers and doing sums, then you're not.
Excel is the world's most popular functional programming language.
PowerShell isn't one of your favorite languages?
Oh, Jesus Christ, no.
Is there any Perl in Speedify?
Thank God, no.
I don't think there's any at all. Programming slowly moves to existing patterns reusage instead of actual coding. Yes. Yeah, one of the things Java did nicely, the other thing besides the garbage collector and taking away the malloc and free stuff, was that they set a coding style. Every bit of Java code that came out had the exact same style. It had big libraries of code for all the standard stuff, and every class started with a capital letter. Every function started with a lowercase letter. I don't remember if they chose tabs or spaces, but they decided on that and made sure on the day they released, every bit of code was completely consistent in style. And that made everyone else who started programming write in that style. And that was one of the strengths of language. It was so readable. You could pick up anyone's code and read it because it read like your code, because they named everything the same way. There was no tabs versus spaces nonsense. Everything was indented the same way. Everything was named in a certain style following what they had done when they put out the libraries.
Yeah, I agree.
And it wasn't really enforced.
Nor is it easy to quantify how much that benefits the programmer, but I believe it does. And I don't think you can get farther than a belief in it. But I agree that that's an important thing. It helps you reason about ultimately what it's saying is, there are problems worth solving, and that's the logic of what your code is actually doing. And there are problems that are not worth solving. And as many times as you complicate the things that are irrelevant, like capitalization or casing things, then that's another thing you have to remember. It's another level of complexity. It makes it harder to find code and reason about it. And you just don't need to deal with it. It's completely irrelevant. I totally agree with that.
All right, Ryan asks, tabs or spaces? I don't want to get into this. This is a religious issue. and I am completely neutral because I don't want to offend the idiots who use spaces. So,
well, you don't have to. I use both in the same file, so nobody can hate me.
Nobody? The famous Silicon Valley episode. Have you seen that?
What's that noise? I'm just indenting.
The developer, he gets this new girlfriend, and she is wonderful, and she's also a software developer, and they're getting along so long. But then he discovers that she uses spaces instead of tabs to indent her code.
Okay, it's psychopathic behavior to indent with the space bar. You don't use spaces with the space bar. I've never seen someone do that. That's really weird.
All right. What's minimal specs for hardware to run Linux Speedify? Could it be running well on any Ethernet-capable Linux device?
It'll run on most routers, but you want something with a higher-end CPU. You're going to want to look at something that's got maybe 4 cores that can have maybe 2 gigahertz or something like that, maybe 3, and you'll be fine.
So Speedify really does try to take over 1 core.
At least. I mean, there's 2. There's the ton, and then there's the regular packet processing. You're going to want 2, okay, at least.
Yeah. But it won't use more. Speedify won't use 8 cores, but if you have 4 cores and you're doing a lot, Speedify might really make 2 of them busy. So if you want to do anything else on your router, that's where cores 3 and 4 come in. They're still there for you. Speedify tries not to hog things, but if you're trying to send like a gigabit of stuff, it could end up using up to 2 cores. Preferably 2 gigahertz, and with the AES hardware encryption.
Hardware encryption, if you're using encryption, is going to be critical.
I think anything that's come out in the last couple of years has it. I mean, almost all, for a long time, during the days of the Raspberry Pi 4.
It was weird.
Like the Raspberry Pi 4 is the only device you can still buy that doesn't have hardware encryption. The only ARM-based device. Mm-hmm. All the ARM, all the Intel stuff these days has it. The Raspberry Pi 3 and 4 are kind of the odd men out.
Yeah.
But Raspberry Pi 4, so we can only do 300 megabits on the Raspberry Pi 4. We're obviously obsessed with speed. So when we say, this thing can only do 300 megabits, we're thinking it's garbage. But we're a little obsessive, and we actually do know that there are a lot of people trying to put together 4 2-megabit lines, trying to finally get up to 5 megabits so that they can, send a photograph. And that's totally legit. And so I think there actually are a lot of use cases where the Raspberry Pi 3 is fast enough.
Plenty fast. I mean, this stream is 15 megabit.
That's right. Yeah, if you go back and look at the stream.
At its peak, yeah.
Yeah,
so you can get by.
That's right. 15 megabits is enough to do a fantastic live stream.
For reference, a lot of cellular plans are somewhere between 5 and 15 megabits.
My Speedify router on Raspberry Pi 5 is working great. Used it yesterday in a remote location. It saved my stream. Thanks.
Yeah, anytime.
Nice.
That's what we're here for.
The Raspberry Pi 5 is it's pretty nice. They really upped the power on that thing. Mm-hmm. It has fast buses, right? The gigabit Ethernet. They actually have gigabit lines running to it. that are completely separate than the multi-gigabit USB 3 bus, which is completely separate than the high-speed lines they have running to the Wi-Fi, right? So when you go back to Raspberry Pi 3, all those devices were actually USB 2 devices. So it had 480 megabits of speed to talk to everything, right? If you started using the Wi-Fi, the Ethernet got slower. If you used the Ethernet, your keyboard picked up latency, right? But now they've upped the speed on everything and have separate lines to everything. And it is just so much faster. And it has hardware encryption. Mm-hmm. So on the earlier Pis, including the 4 had fixed a lot of the data line bus problems, but it didn't have AES encryption. So we had to encrypt everything in software.
Cha-cha.
With Cha-cha, which is an encryption scheme that is easier to do in software than AES. Nearly as secure and much easier to do if you don't have hardware encryption. But now it's got hardware, so we can ask the hardware to do the encryption. Your CPU is freed up to do all the other cool things you want to do. So yeah, very happy with the Raspberry Pi 5, except the prices went way up. The old vision of the Raspberry Pi as the best computer you can buy for $35 is gone, right? It's a much more expensive device now. I mean, it's still reasonably priced, but
we're running quite a few places.
Yeah.
Android and iOS and Mac and Linux and the weird Linux stuff like OpenWRT.
OpenWRT is
maybe it's already on your router. Who knows?
So yeah, we're doing a lot of work on OpenWRT these days, really improving the router stuff.
Yeah, it's a great thing to build off of.
And the next release is actually going to be really epic for routers. the stuff Kevin is working on. There are a bunch of situations where Speedify on a router is 6 times faster in the next release.
Yeah.
And they are not completely contrived situations. They're situations that happen to real people in the real world.
Yeah.
And some of them at Speedify will be 6 times faster. So, boom, I'm very excited about that. All right. Thank you so much for the added feature to update Speedify from the router Speedify GUI. Yeah. So now you're running Speedify on your OpenWRT router. It pops up and says there's a new version of Speedify. You click it, and how does it work? It kicks off Speedify telling OpenWRT to run the update, right?
That's right, yeah.
It
kicks off the opackage update and opackage install Speedify in the background.
It's one thing to run on these operating systems. People more than a year ago were just taking our Ubuntu release, putting it on their OpenWRT routers and saying, hey, it runs. But now that we've been getting it running, there's so many details.
That's right.
So many little things to do it the OpenWRT way. To use their package manager to embed our user interface in their user interface, put our stats into their stats database. And
that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it pays off in like how much nicer it feels to use the software, right?
It does. I mean, if you're a good citizen in the Linux ecosystem and all you get a lot out of doing things that way.
And of course, that's a problem for Linux in that there's so many different distributions
that have their own views of the world.
That it comes out for people like us to not usually be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that's
to put
why
in the extra work to make it really nice on Mint.
Yeah.
I'm happy we run on Mint. We do run on Mint, but not putting in the extra hours, right? It just gets the Ubuntu version.
Yeah, there's definitely a time for experimentation. It's probably good on the whole that there's so many distributions out there that have so many different experiments going on. But it does make, writing a package for 40 package managers a little bit untenable. I mean,
Yeah. So Roy says, good morning, guys. Is there a way to bypass Speedify when using an app that's not in the list? Question 1, what operating system are you on? In Android, there's the app bypass settings, and I assume that's not what you're using because you click that and it lists every app on your system that has used the internet recently, and you can go through and click to let them go around Speedify. On other operating systems, we don't so clearly know the app, but you can use either the command line interface or you'll be able to use just the user interface.
That's right.
To put in domain names, IP address, and port numbers that you would like to have go around Speedify. So that is one of the cool new features coming next. The bypass and the jitter buffer are both getting this same treatment of a nice user interface where you can say which domain names, which IP addresses, which ports should go through it.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice UI as well.
I think some other features will be getting the treatment probably by the end of the year. It's actually never exposed to you. There's a firewall built into Speedify. We could give you a similar user interface to say, just block this stuff. Don't let me go there anymore.
Makes more sense for routers.
Thanks for answering. Using the app Mobilin on both iPhone and Android. So on Android, we've got you completely covered, Roy. In the settings menu, I think there's app bypass, I think it's called. There's 2 bypass things. And you go in there, and on Android, you should just see this Mobilin app and be able to click the bypass switch, and it's solved. On iOS, unfortunately, Apple says it's none of our business what apps you're using. Because Facebook, when they had their VPN, they were looking at what apps everyone was using and were using it to, decide which companies they needed to crush and go after people's privacy and all the things they usually do. So Apple took it away from everyone, including us who have legitimate reasons. I won't record it. I've got a privacy policy and I'm not recording it. I just want to use it to let people click this bypass switch. And Apple said, nope, nobody gets it anymore. It's been ruined. So if you can figure out what ports, what domains it's using, you can put those in and bypass it. iOS doesn't have the command line, right? So on Mac, on Windows, on Linux, there's the command line interface where you can run Speedify CLI space bypass domain add or whatever. But right now, iOS is a problem, but we'll have a user interface for you for that. I'm curious trying out one thing. There's social media, Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, bundle in my country. If I buy it, will Speedify help stream to Facebook or YouTube? Yes, it should. Yeah, streaming two things actually works nicely. Let me demonstrate, because in fact, I'm doing that right now. So this is Speedify running on this M1 Mac right in front of me right now. The data going through this is this live stream. This is real. This is not a demo or a video. So the cellular is this iPhone that I have tethered with a USB cable to the Mac. And unfortunately, I've got Ethernet and Wi-Fi, but they're both actually ultimately Comcast. They're both going back to the same Comcast cable modem. So that's not doing that much for me. But the cellular is. The cellular is protecting me. If Comcast goes out, it'll fix it up. But what am I doing here? Let's scroll down. Live streams. So Speedify detects outgoing streams of video and audio as high priority and calls them streams. And so here you can see I've got one going to Twitch and one going to YouTube Live right now. It does a bunch of things. One, it does standard quality of service, like you see, any high-end router has quality of service. It recognizes, your high priority streams and make sure its packets go first. So if, somebody starts a download while you're in the middle of streaming, your live stream video will get more bandwidth and, win out and not get crushed by it. So we do that stuff. That's important stuff. There are other people who do that. But we also take it into account in the bonding algorithm. That's what no one else does. We try to not use too much of your cellular by default if you left it as secondary. But if you're in the middle of what we see as a live stream, we'll say, wait, I'm going to go ahead and use more cellular data because I need to make sure this stream gets through. So here, streaming with bonding, you can see it. Actually, right now, it's just splitting the traffic between the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet, which both go to the Comcast, because frankly, things are good. Oh, and then that's where you see, right, the green bar, which is the AT&T cellular. It used for a while in these big blocks.
And redundant.
And why did it do that? The answer is because there was loss. Comcast dropped some packets. So Speedify said, whoa, high priority stream going on. We can't let Comcast drop any packets. So it went redundantly and sent some packets on both. That's that. Yes, it works great for live streaming to these services. All right, what's your favorite feature in Speedify? My favorite feature. I mean, it's boring, but the
bonding, maybe? It's got to be bonding.
Is it anything other the way we recognize the high priority streams and say, this is really important, and we bond it, or we go to redundant for it, that's pretty cool, right?
It's not bad, Alex.
And we even recognize, this makes me proud.
We even recognize when you're using it, and then we make it even worse.
No, but like the WebRTC calls, they don't use any standard port number. They jump around in which port they use. They don't use any standard host name or anything. And we spot them, largely because they're so consistent. What's your favorite feature in Speedify?
Oh, favorites are hard. I like how we detect hidden SSIDs. No.
So what updates in Speedify are you excited about?
Kevin's got some awesome work on the performance.
The performance stuff that Kevin's coming out with. It is mostly router specific.
Yeah, and it's all written in Java.
It is not written in Java at all. Yeah, the speed improvements are kind of crazy. You start seeing them and you start thinking, oh my God, Speedify has been garbage up until now. How are we taking people's money? And well, we were better than everything else out on the market.
There are particular things.
A huge step forward.
There are particular things that happen on routers that make it's not noticeable on iOS or Android a lot of the time. It's the situations you get into on a router where they start to come up.
Having the user interface finally exposed for bypass and stuff to let people add the ports and stuff just in the interface, that's pretty important.
Yeah, it's nice.
I mean, obviously there are 3 people for each one of these calls asking how they can add this or that to the bypass list. So we'll get that out to you. Thank you, Will. I know you are super busy working on New software for this bad boy, the Miri X510. It's a router for professional video broadcasters with built-in Speedify. Check it out at Miri.tech. Doing a lot of work with these guys to make it work great on this device.
Yeah.
And bits of what we're discovering on this device go out to everybody. All right. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, whatever it is, wherever you're watching. Thanks, everybody.
Don't use tabs.
See you all online.